Okay, great. So we're recording. So I'm just going to give it another minute, 30 seconds or so, just to see if we've any stragglers, and then we'll begin, if that's all right with everybody.
That's fine.
Okay, great. So welcome, everyone. Everyone's just excited for a very interesting talk. Okay. Yeah, we've one or two more people joining. Great. Okay. Yeah, so we're ready to begin then. So welcome everybody to our fourth installment of the TRANS-SAHARA Expert Talks Series. We're delighted to welcome Director Sumaila Saaka and Dr. Mary Amoa. Dr. Saaka is from the Forum for Natural Regeneration, and Dr. Amoa is from the Kwame Nkrumah University. So just a brief introduction to them both. Director Saaka is the Executive Director for the Forum for Natural Regeneration, which is an environmental NGO in Ghana. He holds a Master of Science from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and brings more than 25 years of experience across natural resources management, climate smart agriculture, and behaviour change programming. At FONAR, he leads efforts to restore degraded agricultural landscapes in semi-dry northern Ghana through community-driven approaches that strengthen livelihoods, enhance food security, and build resilience to climate change. He's a recognised expert in farmer-managed natural regeneration, and as a consultant, he played a key role in the World Vision Ghana Telesni FMNR project implementation in northern Ghana, which ran from 2009 to 2020. He also served as a leading co-facilitator in the World Vision International 15-week FMNR e-workshop from 2018 to 2023 and sits on the advisory board of the EU-funded Trans-Sahara project. So through his leadership at FONAR, Director Saaka continues to champion low-cost, scalable agroforestry solutions that empower farmers and restore ecosystems across Africa's drylands. And then we have our moderator today, Dr. Mary Amoa, who's a fellow at the Technology Consultancy Center of the Kwame Nkrumah University. She holds a PhD in planning, a Master of Science in Development, Policy and Planning, and a Bachelor of Science in Land Economy. And Mary has over 15 years of experience as an educator, coupled with 12 years of industrial practices as a consultant and researcher. Her most recent projects include developing a tourism master plan for the Northern Enclave of Ghana, master planning for African gold, Kwame Nkrumah University and the Technical University of Munich's collaboration on renewable electrification for rural Ghana, the Sustainable Development Goal for UNIS, SUSID, and the Inclusive Architectural Design Concept and Strategies for Accessibility under the sponsorship of GIZ Germany and a host of other projects. Mary considers herself a change agent with a research interest in the politics of space, smart sustainable cities, green housing, land management and governance and rural development in urban informality. Consequently, she advocates for inclusivity of spaces, cities, and other livelihood-oriented resources. So we're delighted to welcome both of them. And yeah, without further ado, I'll pass to Director Saaka, who, if he's ready, he can present his slides.
Please, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, please, we can. But can you put it in the view mode?
View mode.
Yeah, if you click present.
Mode.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Great. Okay. Is this okay?
Yeah, if you are able to put it in full screen, maybe. Yes, perfect.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, you can begin.
You finished with the introductions?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, for coming. My name is Sumaila Saaka. Madam Moderator, please just permit me to pay tribute to some two great friends and colleagues who literally introduced me to FMNR in 2010. They are Peter Abuga, who was the Talansi Farmer Money Natural Regeneration Project Manager when the FMR was introduced by World Vision Ghana in 2009. And then Nobeda Kologla was the World Vision Talansi Area Development Program Manager when the activity was introduced. Unfortunately, both of them are late, but we worked together during the first phase of the project before, they left, and then I continued working with the project until the end of the project in 2010. So these were the two gentlemen that literally, conscripted me into the FMR movement. And then my very good friend, Tony Ronaldo, later on came. And then, virtually introduced me, into the bigger global FMR fields. So today I will be speaking on revitalizing farmer-managed natural regeneration as a scalable agroforestry model in sub-Saharan African semi-dryland areas. Before that, let me just briefly go through the outline of the presentation. I'll talk a bit about FONAR, the organization that I work for, then a bit of the context of the presentation itself, the context of sub-Saharan African drylands, and then say a bit about what is or is not farmer-managed natural regeneration, then highlight some key FMR uptake enablers or change enablers, then a bit about the origin of the modern-day FMR movement that we are now promoting across the world, and then look at some evidence of FMR benefits and impact globally, particularly in sub-Saharan African drylands. Then we can look at how we can revitalize FMNR as a modern agroforestry practice. Then look at some of the hurdles of FMR implementation, particularly at the community level. And then where does FMR fit into the bigger water, energy, food, and ecosystems nexus, particularly in the context of the TRANS-SAHARA project. Then probably we can look at some discussions and take questions and answers. Who are we? Forum for Natural Regeneration. FONAR is a small Ghanaian environmental NGO established in August 2014 by myself and the late Nobeda Kolobila that I mentioned. And the objective was just to use the organization to promote FMR, farmer-managed natural regeneration, scaling in Ghana. And so we create a forum for action learning around landscape restoration for sustainable livelihoods and ecological and biodiversity conservation. Actually, FONAR is the first NGO in the world set up solely for the promotion, upscaling, and modernization of FMNR. What we do is we promote, demonstrate, and encourage implementation of FMR best practices through community-level interventions. We also promote FMNR and agroforestry education in basic schools in Talansi district in particular, where we are working in about 25 basic schools. We think that if we want to sustain and scale up FMNR, then we must put it in the educational system. And so that's why we started with basic schools. If funding permit, probably we might go into the senior secondary schools and probably, higher level educational institutions. We also advocate for FMR recognition and scaling up the design of agroforestry and natural resource management policy measures generally, at various levels, regional level, district level, and possible at the national level. And then we also do a lot of FMNR capacity building and training at various levels. We are currently funded by the Working Trees Foundation of Austria, Edendorf, Foundation of Germany, and then we get a lot of technical support from the FMR Hub that is led by my very good friend Tony Ronaldo. And then Tony and his family, particularly his brother, Peter Ronaldo has also been very supportive in the work that we do in TRANS-SAHARA and in the upper region of Ghana. Now, a bit of the context of, sub-Saharan African semi-arid drylands. Basically, they are located, between the on the transitional margins of deserts. So, if you look at, the case of northern part of Africa, the Sahel of West Africa lies between the Sahara Desert to the north and the Guinea, Sudan, Savannah to the south, where we work in northern Ghana. Northern Ghana, the upper region where we work, is basically, within the Guinea and Sudan Savannah agroecological zone. And then we also have a bit of semi-dry, lands in the Kalahari regions of southern Africa. Basically, the rainfall pattern is unimodal, mostly single rainfall pattern. In the case of northern Ghana, we normally have the rain starting in May, June, and they end in September, October. Currently, the rains have virtually ceased in northern Ghana. And the rainfall, mean annual rainfall is usually between about 200 millimeters to 1,300 millimeters. And so, that is the, rainfall pattern we have. Weather conditions are hot and harsh, particularly during the long dry season of about 7 months. In March, April, we can have temperatures going up as far as 40, 43 degrees Celsius, and it can really be very difficult. And during that period, it can also be very dusty, because it's dry season, the weather is hot, and then there's a lot of winds. Many lands in, sub-Saharan African drylands are heavily degraded, savanna, wood, and grasslands. And because of human activities, in many cases, the lands have virtually become bare, and, we need to do a lot of things to be able to help farmers to be able to produce the things that they do. They will also have heavy reliance on rain-fed agriculture. And in the northern parts of, particularly West Africa, and then moving to the Sahara, a lot of the people practice pastoralism, nomadic pastoralism, where they move with their cattle from place to place looking for feed and water. And then the drylands of sub-Saharan Africa actually have a lot of potentials, even though because of the activities that are happening in place, many of these potentials are virtually in jeopardy. For example, the drylands of sub-Saharan African areas are home to diverse ecosystems, biodiversity, and which are already adapted to the harsh environmental conditions that we find ourselves. These drylands also cover about 43% of the continent and are home to more than 325 million people. But as a result of increasing population growth, land degradation due to unsustainable farming practices, climate change impacts, and the increasing that comes with increasing water scarcity, and then some cases energy shortages. These are all threats to sustainable livelihoods of many people in sub-Saharan African drylands. So tackling these seemingly wicked problems require outside the box thinking. And we do know that many solutions are already on the table, including the TRANS-SAHARA project, which aims to institutionalize novel climate-smart agroforestry systems so that we can achieve a balanced water, energy, food, and ecosystem nexus. And so for many years, farmers in many parts of sub-Saharan African drylands have been practicing what we know as a traditional agroforestry system, which we can leverage to quicken the uptake of modern agroforestry systems in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. And this practice is what, currently known in modern, practices as farmer-managed natural regeneration. Farmer-managed natural regeneration has been used over the years to restore about 300 to 350 million hectares of share agroforestry parklands in the Sahel, Sudani, Savannah African, and many other useful tree species that have been restored through the FMR practice. And we can leverage on it under this project to be able to institutionalized agroforestry practices across the drylands of sub-Saharan African countries. What we do, we need to, acknowledge is that most African savanna tree species have resilient resprouting capacity, even after disturbance like fire, drought, human activities, and then, livestock overgrazing. Once, they are disturbed with the right conditions, they easily sprout out through corpuses and root sprouts. And this is because many of these trees that find themselves in sub-Saharan African drylands have deep and very extensive root systems. So once the right conditions prevailed, they easily have access to water and then the nutrient reserves that are stored in their root systems. And so they easily sprout out and then continue to grow. If you look at the picture on my right, it was taken in August. This is a shade tree that has been cut. And once the rainfall started, then, started sprouting. Farmers can manage it if they wish, so that it goes back into a bigger shade tree. The picture in the middle is a small Fathabia, shrub. We took this picture in January, and January is very dry. Then you could see that the shrub was still surviving. If you look at it from a distance, you might think that it is a bush. But when you go closer, then you realize there is Fathabia. So many stems. Farmers can decide to select some of them, manage them, and within a very short period, it can grow back into a very good tree that can be useful to the environment and useful to farmers. Then the picture on the extreme right was taken in April. April is the extreme, part of the dry season. And at that time, you dare not try to even talk about tree planting because farmers might not even have water to water them. But you could, when you move into the landscape, you could see that a lot of these shrubs are, surviving despite the dryness and then the harsh weather conditions. And so farmer-man natural regeneration is a simple practice where farmers and land users intentionally regenerate and take care of multipurpose native trees and shrubs regrowing from livestock, roots, and self-sown seedlings. It is really not a new practice. Farmers have practiced it over the period, but we are trying to modernize it, as a more sustainable agroforestry system. Where can we apply farmer-man natural regeneration? What are the change enablers? FMR can be used wherever there are living tree stumps with the ability to couples. That's one condition. And then also, seedlings from the soil seed bank. Most of the seedlings from the soil seed bank can lie dormant for many years, but when the right conditions prevail, then they germinate, and then farmers quickly can manage them into, very mature trees depending on the circumstances. And then also seeds that are dispersed through animal dung. Cattle, bears, and others that move in the landscape, they feed on some of these crops, and then they pause, and then when they drop their dung, then they easily dispose these seeds, which can then grow, which can then germinate, and then farmers can manage them. So with the right biofiscal conditions, and then you also have to look at what the people are already doing in terms of practices. So approximations of the target behavior, target ideal behavior that you want to promote. So in our situations, if farmers are already maintaining trees, managing trees on their land, on their lands, on their agricultural farms, or even on their grazing lands, then with the right biofiscal conditions and then the approximate behaviors that they are already practicing, then you can easily, work with them to move towards the ideal behavior in terms of tree management that you want to do. So, like I said, FMR is not entirely new. Farmers already were practicing it in some form. Farmers will leave some trees on their farmlands, prune them, tend them as and when they need them. And then, to help reduce competition with annual crops or resources. So they'll protect the regenerating trees from human, livestock, and then bushfire threats in various ways. Usually, even as projects that we implement in the communities, we also support farmers to be able to manage fires, to be able to take care of grazing animals, and then to let them understand that they can also, protect the trees even on their farm so that they are not vandalized by human beings or other disturbances. But my good friend and then mentor Tony Ronaldo, I guess he's has joined in, popularly known as the forest maker, was actually the person who rediscovered or pioneered and popularized the modern day farmer natural regeneration technique in the Niger Republic in the early 1980s. Tony arrived in Niger in 1982, as a missionary with his very young family, lived in Niger for 17 years, stayed with the people, shared in their joys, shared in their sorrows, learned their language, and spoke their language very well. And in the course of his work in trying to introduce, tree planting, because he got to Niger at a time that there was the Sahel drought. So there was, a lot of international programs that wanted to use tree planting to, revive the landscape there. The tree planting was not working because of the situation. So it was in the course of one of Tony's, tree planting journeys that he realized that maybe through divine intervention that there were, some bushes around that probably when you are not careful, you might think that they are just bushes, but these were tree stumps, sprouts that were growing up. And through that divine intervention, Tony discovered FMNR. How he did it is actually popular knowledge, is on the internet. And then, maybe at the right time, Tony probably will join us and then also tell us a bit about his story. So the F in Farmer Natural Regeneration, the F stands for farmer, because FMR focuses on empowering farmers to intentionally manage and regenerate natural occurring trees and shrubs on their lands. The emphasis is on the active role of farmers in selecting, pruning, and protecting trees or shrubs to improve their soil and productivity. Mostly, it is not we who are promoting it that determine that. It is the farmers who decide which tree species they want to keep on their farms, how many of them do they want to keep on their farm. Then we then support them with some modern tree pruning and management techniques. And once they do that, then they are able to, manage trees so that they don't compete with the crops that they leave on their farms for some other, soil nutrients like water, and then seed in some cases, and in some cases even the space that the trees and then the crops will have to look for. So currently there's a global trend that reforestation, agroforestry practices should be based on farmer and community approaches, or community and community-centered approaches. And that is basically what FMR has been doing. We try to pass on the knowledge about landscape restoration, decision-making power into the hands of farmers and the pastoralists who work on their land, because they know their land better. And everybody can practice it from our experience, because men, women, children, the farm household generally, they all work together to practice FMNR. So it is gender sensitive, it is socioeconomic sensitive, and it is also socially inclusive. In the traditional African farming landscape, children actually play a very important role in terms of agricultural practices. And so we, at FMR, at FONAR, we introduce the concept to children so that they also understand it better. And when they work with their families, and they can also pass on the knowledge to farmer practices. And currently, a lot of NGOs in Ghana, particularly World Vision, and then some others, CRS, we're all working together to promote FMNR, and in many cases, working with our government partners like Ministry of Agri, Forestry, Community Development, and our district assemblies. We say FMNR is rapid because you don't need to establish tree nurseries. What you just need to do is to tap into the underground forest that is already in existence on the field. It is low cost because You don't spend money establishing, tree nurseries that some cases you need to transport, you need to move them even into the communities. So the setup cost is already virtually nil. It is actually sensitive because the farmers are already leaving trees on their landscape that they know. And then they know the uses. And so it doesn't become something like you are introducing something new. You are not bringing exotic trees that they don't know the uses. And they are not even sure when you give them trees to plant, at the end of the day, the tree will belong to them because they are not sure, whether you come back later and say, okay, I supported you to plant the trees, and so I want to take over. And it's also scalable because it is promoted through farmer to farmer extension. Once farmers accept the idea, then they, talk to other farmers, and before you realize it is growing, on a bigger scale. And of course, it is also high impact because once it takes off, then you can get the immediate benefits spreading across the landscape. So this is just to share you an idea of, how, FMR was, evaluated in terms of causing an environment in Senegal in terms of using it to revegetate croplands in Senegal. A study, conducted by Winterborn and his colleagues in 2020, they estimated that if you could use 50 US dollars to regreen a cropland, of about a hectare in Senegal compared to using tree planting to regreen or to revegetate the same, 1 hectare of land using 500 US dollars. And that is virtually like 1/3. So FMNR is cost effective. There are even other estimates where in some environments, the cost of using tree planting was much higher as compared to using FMR to do regreening. And for us as a project, basically, we normally promote FMR as a livelihood approach. And what we do with farmers basically is to help them to be able to meet what we call the 5 essential basic needs simultaneously on the same piece of land. And this is food, fiber, fuel wood, fodder, and fertilizer. If you look at my picture on the right, you see the plant there. It is taken from Tindungo community where the Ghana FMR Living Lab is located. It was taken in July, and the tree there is the Farhabia albida. It has a very interesting behavior. During the rainy season, the leaves will shed, fall under it, and create an island of fertility. And then when farmers plant their crops there, all other crops, cereals, legumes, and all this, they do very well. So that is the soil fertility component of what some of the trees that farmers leave on their farmers can do. And then once they do that, then immediately it improves their crop yields. And then farmers would also leave certain trees like the shade trees that will provide fruits for them to consume. And even in the case of the shade trees, that is the picture on the right top. After they have consumed the tree, the women will use them, process them into shea butter for domestic use and sometimes for commercial purposes. And then fiber, which they get in the middle picture on top. You see, the plant that the woman is managing is what we call plextoma. It has fiber. It provides fiber for farmers to use to, do handicrafts and other things. And then immediately, when farmers go to even do pruning, what they immediately gather, mostly the women, the left down photo is firewood. And then, so FMR is a win-win situation immediately. Of course, as the practices scale up, then some of the other environmental benefits, soil fertility improvement, nutrient cycling, water cycling, and then biodiversity conservation will then come into play, including pollination of crops and other plant species. And so just a bit about sharing a bit about the demonstrable impacts of FMR across different landscapes. This is from Talansi, Yamaraga Hills, where I work with the Talansi project for for the 10 years that the project was implemented. This Yamanaga was one of the early first communities that we implemented FMR. And then when we introduced the practice into the community in 2010, this particular hill on the left was very bare, no trees. And within 2 years after the people have accepted it, doing pruning, ensuring that their animals were controlled in terms of grazing, ensuring that the trees were not cut. Within 2 years, the land has virtually started developing into a forest. This encouraged the community members to move into another site and then also started doing the tree management practices that we introduced. And within 4 years, that site has actually been also becoming virtually a forest. You can see them from the pictures. So by the time that the Talansi project ended in 2020, the combined, acreage, combined level of land degradation came to about 750 hectares that were regenerated. And currently, there are a lot more other projects run by World Vision FONAR in the northern part of Ghana, particularly in the Upper East region, where we are, vegetation mini farmlands on agricultural landscapes using FMNR. In Niger, which we call the mecca of FMNR, about 200 million new trees, were established on about on 5 million hectares of farmland within a period of 20 years. This translated to about 500 million tons of grains, particularly millet, sorghum, and maize, and that is huge. That could not have been achieved using traditional, tree planting agroforestry systems. So this is an image of how FMR spread in southern Niger over a period of 14 years, starting from 1975, when the Sahel drought was at its peak with very little tree cover. When FMR was introduced in the early 80s, by 2005, the tree cover had virtually gone up a lot. That is the middle picture. And by 2016, over a period of 40 years, the tree cover was actually huge. And this is also a satellite image from the northern part of Burkina Faso in an area called Risim, northern Burkina Faso. And this is a Fadhabia albida agroforestry system. This is basically in the dry season. Dry season, they have a lot of leaves. And you could see, if you look at the picture carefully, you see that there are some crop stalks under it. During the farming season, a lot of these trees will have shaded leaves, and they provide natural fertilizer. You don't need to apply artificial fertilizer in this particular context to be able to grow a lot of the cereal crops. And then during the dry season, farmers, after harvesting their crops, they allow their livestock. You can see cattle grazing, and as they graze under them, because they produce some very edible fodder for livestock. They graze there, and then they also harvest the leaves for animal feed. And as they graze, they drop their dung, and then the dung also help to improve soil fertility, and then also to be able to some of the pods they germinate, and then you can easily get new tree seedlings growing up that farmers can manage. So if you look at this picture, you see that there are very young albida as well as the old trees that are there. And then this is from Ethiopia, the World Bank's Carbon project fund called Humble Farmer Natural Regeneration Project. Within 4 years, the project was used to restore about 2,700 hectares of degraded lands in Ethiopia and boosted crop yields significantly. Tono was part of this project, and it was very marvelous, and it couldn't have used the normal tree planting in that kind of harsh environment to be able to restore degraded lands at that scale. This is an estimated reduction in the average number of drought-affected people through use of FMR and other, crop productivity technologies, by 2015. This was a crop modeling activity that was done on behalf of the World Bank. They were trying to look at 3 different agricultural, crop production technologies. One of them was drought drought-tolerant packages. For example, you introduce drought-tolerant crops and then heat-tolerant crops. And then the other package was soil fertility management. And the soil fertility management was basically introducing fertilizer, either fertilizer or manure. And then the other component was what if you introduce agroforestry, what would be? So if you look at the bar on the extreme left, the blue, this is significant drought tolerance. Then the orange is fertility management, and then the green is an agroforestry. You realize that if you had no trees on the landscape, and you were only using the drought tolerant packages and the fertility management packages, the number of people, estimated reduction in the average number of people drought affected people reduced, would have been virtually about 4.9 million people. If you introduce low tree density, and for this particular model, they use 5 trees per hectare, and the trees that were actually modeled was the Fathavia albida. And this modeling was done in 10 countries, 5 in East Africa, 3 in East Africa, Uganda, Ethiopia, and then Kenya, and then 7 in West Africa. Ghana was not included, but Nigeria was included. If you introduce low tree density, about 5 trees on the landscape, you can have some significant increase in the number of people who will be drought resilient by 2030, about 13% increment. But if you had about 10 trees on the landscape, you could see that there could be significant reduction in the number of people who will be affected by, drought resilience, about 30% increment. So that just tells us that FMNR can make a huge difference if you combine it with some other technology, crop production technologies. FMR alone can make a huge difference. And so how do we revitalize farmer natural regeneration so that we can move it towards a modern agroforestry type of technology? Already farmers are leaving trees on their farms intentionally. So what we need to do is to probably work with them to be able to improve their design, plan, and manage how the trees can be done. But one other interesting thing is that in farmer natural regeneration, farmers usually are not very intensive of their activities. During the dry season, most of the time there's very little work on the farms, and in some cases they don't even take care of the trees there. And so other people go into their farms and harvest the trees and other things. And so they don't integrate, particularly if they are doing livestock keeping, they don't integrate the livestock keeping very well into the cropping system. And that is one of the things that probably, as people of us who are working there in science, in academia, we probably want to develop further activities around that. And they also need to work with farmers to be able to integrate crop production, tree management, and environmental conservation measures into the system so that they can work together, so that they are able to achieve positive interactions between crops and trees and livestock. This is one area that probably we need a lot of research, because when you have trees on farms, the interaction could be either negative or positive. And so some trees would definitely compete with the annual crops that farmers leave on their farms for forage resources like nutrients, water, and even in some cases space, and then shade. How do we work with farmers to be able to identify those kind of crops that they can leave? And then also we need to also build farmers' capacity and the capacity of extension staff in agroforestry and agri. We need to improve farmer education even in the formal sector. We need to do a lot more research, and then develop our agri extension services, and then work with communities and local government agencies to create and implement local bylaws around fire management, around natural resource management. We've been doing it on a small scale, but we need to work with some other partners to be able to broaden it. And then, of course, promote active policy support at various levels. It could be at a local level, working with local government authorities, regional level authorities in context, and probably looking at it at the national level in terms of agroforestry policies and then programs and then interventions, and then address very concerning issues like unclear land tenure, tree tenure, which are not the same. Land tenure and tree tenure are not the same concerns, and then work towards how we can add value to the tree products that we find in our FMNR and then agroforestry systems, and definitely tackle some of the attitudes at various levels, attitudes of farmers, attitudes of authorities, attitude of sometimes researchers, and then some technical advisors. I'm just going to share a bit on some of the challenges or the hurdles, and then because we are working at the community level, just community level hurdles. Of course, there are other challenges at various levels, higher levels. In the case of the community level, sometimes farmers are a bit skeptical about, adopting FMNR because of negative attitude towards trees. They will tell you that trees compete with annual crops for resources. That is true. Nutrients, water, space, and light. But then we tell them that if you manage the trees very well, using basic pruning techniques, you can minimize a lot of these interactions as much as possible. And then because farmers usually have very very, little experience in terms of, tree management, that's what we do, helping them, training them so that they can be able to take care of, trees on their farmlands. In many contexts, particularly in Talanse, when we're implementing the Talanse FMR project, we realized that it was a lot more difficult to, tell farmers to leave a lot more trees on their farmlands when the farmlands are small. And where we are working currently in the Nabdan district, a lot of the farmers are practicing FMR on their farmlands because they have access to bigger land spaces. So small farm size can be a major barrier in terms of FMR uptake in certain contexts. And then labor availability. FMR is really labor intensive. And in modern times where a lot of children are now in school, where you don't have a lot of farm labor, it becomes a lot more difficult for farmers to be able to, keep a lot of trees. And that's why they just clear them off. Once they clear them off, then the problem of managing them on a year-to-year basis become limited. And then in some cases, bushfires can be a problem during the dry season, long dry season from January, February, March, April. And so we have interventions mostly. We train farmers on how to manage small bushfires, and then in some cases, give them some logistics to be able to do that. And the animal browsing is also another problem that damages young trees. And it's something that we need to think about. And the unclear land tenure and tree tenure. And then sometimes too, because the benefits of agroforestry, living trees on farms are really very slow. It takes 10 years, it takes many years. And so farmers will tell you, when am I going to be able to get the benefits? And of course, high expectations, which I say is the root of all headaches, is one of the problems. The picture you see there was a female farmer we encountered during one of our visits. And then my colleague was asking him, why are you clearing these useful tree shrubs? He said, oh, they are nuisance, they are useless. So those are some of the issues. And so looking at the bigger picture in terms of where do we take, FMR in the context of the Trans-Sahara project, we can use FMR to, improve the food systems, which I've already talked about. FMR can be used to, improve energy. For example, if you take a firewood, once you have firewood, many of the places we work in, and in Africa, many African drylands in particular, firewood or biomass energy is still a major source of energy for heating. And once we introduce, agroforestry systems, we can produce a lot more firewood that will be available for communities to use. Firewood, we are told by the experts, is even carbon neutral if it is sustainable, develop sustainable use. And then we can also even, develop some bioenergy specific crops that we can use to supplement the energy sources of communities. And once we're also doing that, then, agroforestry generally and FMR would also improve soil fertility. It will improve water regulation, water filtration. And so we are also enhancing water availability for farmers and then reducing, evaporation from the base surface soil if you have more trees. And so you have more water, you have more food, and then you will have more access to other alternative energy sources. And so once we are doing that, we're improving the social, economic, and environmental benefits that FMR comes with communities. And for me, I think that FMR technology readiness level has gone up beyond the proof of concept. It has been tried and tested by many African smallholder farmers across African drylands. It is now practiced in more than 40 countries in Asia and Africa. FMR is now recognized as a UN Sustainable Development Practice in 2020. It is endorsed by leading organizations and donors like the UN agencies, FAO, the World Bank, the EU, the World Resources Institute, and the Global Environment Facility. What probably we need to do is work more to make sure that it is recognized by, national governments and then some of the, direct organizations that we work with to be able to scale it up. We have done a lot of advocacy in Ghana, and it is encouraging to say that our national governments are also increasingly recognizing FMNR as a good agroforestry practice. And so it is good. It is time for us to scale up, integrate FMR into the emerging climate smart agroforestry, systems that we have, for greater success. Because if we don't scale up, the kind of impact that we'll get to be able to get the environmental benefits will be minimal. FMR is practiced in Ghana, which is one of the Trans-Sahara, focus countries. FMR is in Tunisia. We have, through the World Vision program, we'll be able to train some people in Tunisia. We have an NGO there called CAPT. We've trained them and they are practicing it. FMR is very huge in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is one of the catalysts scaling up, FMR scaling up countries that World Vision, International is supporting. Tunisia, Uganda, Kenya, and then Zambia. These are the scaling up countries. So we can leverage on the, huge knowledge and skills of FMR in Tunisia and see how we can incorporate some of the, things that they are doing there into the Trans-Sahara project. And let me also indicate that even FMR is in Europe and Central Asia. It is in Albania, it is in Kazakhstan, and it is also in Mongolia. We have trained some people. My good friend, Oceansina of Feeding Albania Foundation, has introduced in it. They've been working in FMR, introducing FMR for the last 1 or 2 years. I've done some work for them, supporting them, and they have done spectacular work. Many families are actually buying into the idea. The World Bank-led Kazakhstan Resilient Landscape Restoration Project, which started in 2021 to 2021, had FMR as part of the component. Actually, the project says that wherever there are tree storms and the seedling.
Hello, Mr. Saaka. Hello.
I think he freezed.
And I'm afraid we are also running out of time.
Yes, maybe we can wrap it up. Ask him to wrap it up a moment.
Yes, please, when he comes back.
So that's it. Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Saaka, we want to thank you so much for that insightful presentation on FMNR. And I think it syncs so well with what we are trying to achieve here with the Trans-Sahara project. But there are some few questions that we would want to find answers to. So we have one question, which is, what are the main hurdles in scaling up FMNR? What are the main hurdles? And that is from Daphne. So what are the main hurdles if we are likely to face in case we want to scale up the FMNR? Can you provide an answer to that for us?
There are, like I just said, if you say FMR, if you see FMR as a technology, I think we have reached a level where it has spread. But scaling up maybe it can be at the regional level or even at the national level. So like in the case of Ghana, if you look at the northern part of Ghana where we have a very suitable environment for scaling up, it then means that if we have been working in one district, particularly if you take even the Upper East region, we have 15 districts. We are working in about 3 districts. How do we even take it to all the 15 districts? Then that is where sometimes the policy comes. For example, at the district assembly level, the district assembly develop development plans. Do they incorporate farmer managed natural regeneration into these development plans? At the national level, in the case of Ghana, we don't even have a national agroforestry policy, much more to talk about incorporating the different agroforestry models. So one of the things that we need to do is and we have been doing that currently, even within the global level, World Vision, which is a huge partner, and we've been trying to engage policymakers at various levels. Well, if you don't have the right policy in place, then it becomes difficult for you even to be able to communicate or market the activity. So one of them will be to work on policy, and one of them will also be to develop our capacities in terms of technical extension service delivery. Like I said, if we don't have it even in our schools, we don't train the younger farmers who are growing up, then how do we do scaling up? And then in our academia, for example, if you take our universities, KU, I'm not really sure whether agroforestry or FMR is even as part of the curriculum that you teach in the university. Fortunately for us, if you take a country like Kenya, as part of the trainings that we do in World Vision, we have been able to train some, teaching staff from more universities, and they are introducing FMR into their natural resource management and agricultural, agricultural faculty, and then environmental quality. So there are many ways. One of them will be policy. One of them will be to, train people who can provide very good technical assistance, and one will be also to incorporate it into the school system that we find ourselves, and also let farmers be able to help them to develop the value chain of FMR agro practices. Otherwise, they won't see it to be useful for something that they want to invest in.
All right. Thank you so much. So I hope that question has been answered. And personally, I wanted to find out what are the activities that go into the management aspect of FMNR. We know that the F is specifically for farmers, but when you talk about the M, what are the specific activities that go into that?
Basically, training farmers on how they can prune trees so that they can get the benefits that trees would provide. How do they even harvest the trees? How do they select what type of tree they want to leave? So the management basically has to do with training them how to, modern, scientific ways that they can prune and manage trees on their farms. And because many of them, their concern is that the trees compete with their annual crops. So what do they do to be able to keep the trees on their farms so that the trees don't pose as a problem? So the major farm management activity that we do is to help them to be able to prune trees very well.
All right. So
And then
it's already
also to manage fires.
okay. So let me put in my last question. I know that in most of the African countries, we have this dual system of governance, the white man's or the contemporary one, and then the traditional authority. How do we inculcate the traditional authorities in accepting FMNR? What are your experiences when it comes to the areas that you have worked?
Usually, we don't really have a bigger problems in terms of working with traditional authorities. For example, if we take in the case of Talanse, the Yamerga, restoration project that I was talking about, one of the key enablers of FMR Arctic was the role that the chief and his elders played. The Yamarga chief late now, and even the current chief, they were very supportive. And because in our context, the land mostly belongs to the people. Lands are owned by traditional authorities and this. So chiefs, have a key role to play. So once we have a receptive local authorities, chiefs, their elders, landowners, then that is a very good starting point for FMR uptake.
All right. Thank you so much. In your presentation, I think when you got to the phase of the challenges, you were talking about the role that small farm size can have when it comes to FMNR. How do we improve that if Trans-Sahara would want to situate the project within FMNR? How do we improve the issue of land size?
I'm not sure we'll be able to increase land size, but there are some particular type of trees that probably depending on the context anyway. And then, for example, if you take Farabia, even if your land is small and you are able even to leave a few of them, they will improve the productivity of land so much. Some of the areas, maybe you could also, try to see how we can let them understand that even if your land size is small and is bare, there's no tree, it will become less productive than if you have a few trees on it. And in our situations, in many cases, you see that the farmers will leave a few trees there. But depending on the context, what type of trees can we promote? For example, if we promote Fatabia, even smaller landscapes, if you have a few of them, it will make the land more productive. So we might want to also, as a project, work with the research institution. How do we domesticate, improve the the maturity of the trees so that farmers get to understand that even with a small land size, you can leave some specific trees on the land that will improve the land productivity even better than when you don't have any tree at all on the land.
All right. Thank you so much. I would want to put in my final question and then, okay, there's a hand up. So, Thelma, I don't know if I have gotten the pronunciation right, but please, you can ask your question.
Exactly, yeah. My name is Tamer. I'm from the Ingref. Yes, you pronounce very well. First of all, I want really to thank Dr. Saaka for his presentation and the success story that he presented for us. And my questions is much more what I have noticed is this success story. It's much more. It's succeeded because of the. It's related much more on the local conditions. And he's speaking about scaling up this experience, which should be very good. But I think that to scale it up in another country, like in North Africa, in Tunisia, for example, the condition is not the same. And so probably we have other concerns, other problems than the ones in Ghana or in other places in sub-Saharan countries. So I'm wondering, because he's speaking about what he calls the farm enterprise management, which is very, very good. So I want to hear about how he can manage to build these structures and to have it engaged in such projects. And see, this project is supported, I suppose it's supported by policy level and local governments. So this experience could be interesting if you can scaling it up in other countries like in Tunisia. So probably, oh, okay, so Saaka is not here. Okay, so let's discuss about this issue. So I want just to hear about his experience, how we can scaling up when it comes to the management of this farm enterprise.
All right. So it looks as if Mr. Saaka has left us again.
Yes, but you
So
can make
let's,
it. You are good in making it.
yeah, so let's just open it up for us all to discuss whilst we wait for him to join, and then we would wrap up very soon. So I don't know if anybody has a thought on Farmer's question. Is there any contribution from any of us? I would want to say that when you look at the submission that Mr. Saaka did, he said that there is something called the seed bank within the earth. And that presupposes that within the earth there are seeds. And so given the right condition, it will always come out. And so although the situation in Ghana may be different from the situation in Tunisia, I believe that there are some things that are common. For example, the seed bank within the earth. Ordinarily, you sometimes see things sprouting out even though they have not been intentionally planted. And so I would say that if such a situation exists in Tunisia, then farmers can be encouraged that if there's a sprout and it's in the form of maybe a shrub or a tree, that cannot harm anything the farmer is growing, that can be managed and still help to sustain the restoration of the ecosystem within the farmer's space. So I believe that the situations may not be the same, but we can always adapt. So long as we have the foundation, the principles, we can always adapt. So maybe the one we are sharing can be a model that can be subject to adaptation within the various scope that we are having our living labs. I don't know whether Mr. Saaka is back. He's still not back.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, so can we have anyone else?
I think if
Yeah, what do
there,
we do?
I think if nobody has any more questions, I think perhaps we should wrap up. Just so you know that this recording will be made available both on YouTube and on the project website. I think now in a moment we will leave the project email. So if anyone has any more questions, they can send them our way. But I think maybe we'll just give 2 more moments, and if he does not join, because we're already running late as it is.
Yes.
What I will say in the meantime is our next installment is with Professor Yuji Hara from Wakayama University in Japan. And that's on the 13th of November at 11 a.m. Central European time. So we will be announcing that tomorrow on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. So we'll have the registration link. So if you are able to join, that would be fantastic. I think we'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes, and then if we get nothing, I think we will have to wrap up because we are 15 minutes over now. In any case, even though he's not here, thank you very much, Dr. Amoa. You've been wonderful despite all the technical issues, and obviously thanks to Director Saaka as well. These things happen, so not much we can do. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And again, join next week. Okay, so is that it, Louis? Nothing yet.
I see someone typing from Ingrid.
Yeah. If there's any more questions.
I don't see anything in the chat box.
No, I think that's it. In any case, the email is there. So if you direct us any questions, we can pass them on to Director Saaka. Okay. Oh.
Very bad day. Very bad day for me. Really very bad day. Oh, sorry for that. Internet, no.
These things happen, don't worry.
We are almost done.
Yes.
Somebody was asking a question. I think this, or it's time.
Tamur,
I didn't,
yes.
I didn't, I
If you're
didn't get a
still there.
question.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
there.
still here. I'm still here.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry for that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, I don't know if you had heard my question.
No, not please.
Okay. So
No,
I will make it very short because we are almost to close this session. But just to make
exactly.
it very short about the management of the farmer enterprise management. So how you have dealt with this issue? Because in our case, it's a bit different to yours. And since you have reached a good success, so there is we have presented very good results. So I'm wondering how you have managed to establish this enterprise company with farmers to succeed in your project and to eventually scaling up in another condition.
Yeah, we basically work with the farmers themselves, with their community leaders, and then with local government authorities. That is a success to FMNR.
But
While the farmers
my
are
question is
receptive.
how. My question is how. So okay, we can. It's always a recommendation to work, to have a policy support, to work with the local government. It's good, but still, it's not an easy task. So
That's
how you
very
can?
true.
Yes,
That is
yes,
really
yes.
very true. So largely, in many of the cases that we have been working, largely, the bigger players have always been the farmers and the communities. They will build it up to the local government level.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if there are no more questions, I think if you all agree, it's best to wrap up now. Thank you very much to Director Saaka for joining us despite his technical issues. Appreciate these things happen, so can't be helped. And to Dr. Amo, who very kindly agreed to moderate. I'll just reiterate again, please try and join us on the 13th for our next installment. And I think we'll end it here. Yes?
Yeah, thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
And then I'm really sorry for the hitches that come out from the internet connectivity. I hope that next time I'll get a better reception than this. Then Mary, thank you so much for accepting to moderate, and thanks all of you for the patience.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Director, and thank you also, Mary.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah.